moving on to our next topic, which is rhetorical synthesis. This sounds super complicated. Alright, I don't even know what these words mean either. But you don't need to worry because these will be the easiest questions on the SAT. And I was gonna say I'll cash up you $5 if you get them wrong. But if you get them wrong, then you're generally just dumb. I'm sorry, but they're just that easy. Anyways, rhetorical synthesis, these questions are really just these bullet point questions. So they're usually going to be around questions 24 to 27, and let's break them down. Break it down. All right. First thing you're going to notice when you see these questions, of course, are going to be these bullet points. But you don't even need to read these bullet points. All right, just pretend they're not even there. Because in the answer choices, you're going to be rereading the exact same bullet points. So you're not going to be getting anything from reading them the first time. Save yourself some time and just skip over them. Alright, next thing you're gonna do, move on to the question, and you're gonna have to find the task. So in punctuation, you knew every single question, you just have to find the grammatical error. This time, you actually have to find out what the question is asking you. So, in this case, it's going to be emphasizing the size of the sculpture. So, let's go through these answer choices and see which one emphasizes the size of the sculpture. Alright, first one, we have A. Richard Serra is an American artist known for his large metal sculptures. Okay, he's an American artist. I don't care. He's known for his large sculptures. That's cool, but it's not talking about how big his sculptures are, so we can mark that one out. Next one. Richard Serra's gutter corner splash night shift is made of lead. That's cool that's made of lead, but it doesn't talk about its size, so this one's also wrong. Next one. Gutter corner splash night shift, a large metal sculpture by artist Richard Serra, stretches roughly 2 feet wide and 9 feet tall. So there we go. This actually talks about how big it is, about its size. So C is going to be our answer. And let's just to check, do number D as well. I just said number D. Okay. Answer choice D. American artist Richard Serra creates large sculptures from metals such as lead. That's cool, but it doesn't talk about its size. So this one is also going to be wrong. Here's another rhetorical synthesis problem, but this time I'm not even going to show the bullet points at all just to prove that you don't need them. First thing we're going to do is find the task, and that is to identify the painting for which Picasso won the Carnegie Prize gold medal. Now you're going to see the second part a lot where it says which choice most effectively uses relevant whatever. Alright, you can just ignore that. The second you find your task, just move on to the answer choices. So let's look at A. Picasso won a Carnegie Prize gold medal for the painting Portrait of MME Picasso. Wow, told you exactly what painting he won it for, so A is going to be your answer. Just like that, it's that easy. But for funsies, I'm gonna go through the rest as well. The Carnegie Museum of Art awarded Picasso a gold medal in 1930. That's cool and all, but it doesn't tell you what painting he won it for, or won it on. Oh, I don't even know which way. Whatever, it doesn't tell you what painting. The Carnegie Prize is an international art competition administered by the Carnegie Museum of Art in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's great, but it doesn't talk about Picasso at all. I mean, let alone what painting he won it for. It doesn't even mention Picasso's name. In 1930, an artist from Spain won the Carnegie Prize gold medal for a painting. Okay, I mean, this artist from Spain is probably Picasso, but you know, can't say probably. It doesn't even exactly and directly say it's Picasso, and it doesn't even tell you what painting they want it on. So A is going to be your answer once again. Okay, here are some rhetorical synthesis problems, and there's 25 of them, and I will put the link to this PDF in the description as well as the answer key. So at any point, you can always skip ahead and work these out yourself, but if you ever get stuck, you can always refer back to this video, because I will be solving all 25 of them. I don't know why these bullet points are missing, but it really doesn't matter because we don't need to read these anyways, we can just ignore these. Alright, first thing we gotta do is find out the task, and that's to present the primary aim of the research study. So basically, what's the goal? Why did they do the research study? Let's look at it. Okay, I'm gonna just butcher it. Boseo. Okay, his name's Boseo. Boseo's team wanted to better understand. Let's stop right there. Why did they want to do the study? Well, it's because they wanted to better understand. Alright, they wanted to better understand something. That's a goal. So, our answer is A. Just like that. It's super easy. It's just like that. Alright, I don't know why the difficulty is 3, and 3 is the hardest, by the way, but it's really that easy. I'm gonna do the rest of them for fun though. Let's see. The researchers used laboratory models that simulated the arrangement of flexible sticks and analyzed the points where sticks touched one another. Alright, so that talks about how they did the study, but it doesn't talk about why they did the study. After analyzing the points where sticks touched, the researchers found that these structures became stiffer when pressure was applied. That's cool, so that's what they found out as they did that study, but it doesn't talk about why they did the study. As analyzed by both sales team, bird nests are uniquely flexible yet cohesive engineered structures. Okay, that's another cool thing about bird's nests, but it doesn't talk about why they did the study. So the answer is A. The reason they did the study was because they wanted to do something. Alright, it doesn't matter what they wanted to do, but they did want to do something, and that's a reason. Question number 2, let's find the task. This time I'm gonna highlight it because I realized that drawing a box, I'm really bad at drawing boxes. So anyways, the task is to introduce Catherine Howerson's book to an audience already familiar with the Atlantic Monthly. So there's two important things to this. The first thing, we need to introduce her book. Alright, that's the first thing. The second thing, the audience should already be familiar with the Atlantic Monthly. So let's go through our answer choices now. Catherine Halverson's Faraway Woman and the Atlantic Monthly discusses female authors whose autobiographies appeared in a magazine in the early 1900s. So, does this introduce her book? Yes. It talks about her book right here, and it says what the book is. It says that it discusses female authors. Does it address it to an audience already familiar with the Atlantic Monthly? Yes, because it doesn't provide any background information on what the Atlantic Monthly is. So our answer is going to be A. Now the thing is, in this case, you might not know that The Faraway Woman and Atlantic Monthly is Catherine Howerson's book. So in these cases, you can go back to these bullet points and find out right here, her book is named, well, The Faraway Woman and the Atlantic Monthly. So sometimes you can go back to the bullet points for reference, but most of the times you want to skip them so you can save yourself some time on the SAT. Anyways, let's go through the other answer choices. B. A magazine called the Atlantic Monthly, referred to in Catherine Howerson's book title, was first published in 1857. So there's two things wrong with this. The first thing is, it talks about the Atlantic Monthly. It says it was published in 1857. Now, the audience should already know this because they should already be familiar, so that's the first thing wrong. The second thing wrong, it doesn't introduce her book. Yeah, it says that it was referred in the book title, but that's it. It doesn't talk about her book at all, so that's why it's wrong. Let's look at C. Faraway Woman and the Atlantic Monthly features contributors to the Atlantic Monthly, so it does introduce her book. That's good. First published in 1857 as a magazine focusing on politics, art, and literature. Now, it just described what the Atlantic Monthly is. It said that was published in 1857, and it said it was a magazine focusing on politics, art, and literature. So that's bad, because the audience should already know this. So C is going to be wrong. D. An author discussed by Catherine Howerson is Juanita Harrison, whose autobiography appeared in the Atlantic Monthly in the early 1900s. So, yes, it doesn't give any background information on the Atlantic Monthly, so this part is good. However, it doesn't introduce her book at all. It doesn't even say the book's name, so that's why it's going to be wrong. And our answer is going to be A, because it introduces her book, it says it's about female authors, and it doesn't provide any background information on the Atlantic Monthly. Question number 3, let's find our task. So, the student wants to explain a disadvantage of relying on audio features to predict a song's popularity. Okay, I think I just realized a pattern, but anything after wants to, I think that's going to be your task. So in this case, it's going to be explain a disadvantage of relying on audio features to predict a song's popularity. So let's move on to our answer choices. A. Many popularity predicting algorithms are based on a song's audio features such as loudness and pitch intervals. That's cool, but it doesn't talk about a disadvantage. B. Algorithms based on audio features may misidentify. Let's just stop right there. It talks about audio features, and it talks about a disadvantage that may misidentify something. So, that's our answer. But for funsies, of course, I will move on to the rest. Audio features describe acoustic traits such as pitch intervals, which may vary within a song, whereas descriptive tags describe fixed traits such as the genre, which are reliable predictors of popularity. Okay, it talks about audio features and then talks about descriptive tags, but it doesn't talk about a disadvantage. Yes, it says that pitch intervals may vary, but it doesn't talk about how that might be bad. So C is not our answer. The MSD's descriptive tags are reliable predictors of a song's popularity as the traits they describe are fixed. Okay, it's talking about descriptive tags, not audio features, so that's just wrong. So our answer will be B, because it talks about a disadvantage, which is it may misidentify something. Question number 4, let's find a task, and we already know that's going to be anything after wants to, so it's going to be emphasize a difference between the two books. Let's look at our answer choices. Although both are powerful works of literature that contributed to new legislation, Equiano's book is an autobiography while Sinclair's is fictional. So yes, it barely says a similarity, but the main point trying to get across is that one book's an autobiography and the other book is fictional. So your answer is going to be A. Just for fun, let's read the rest. B. They may have written about different topics, but Equiano and Sinclair both influence readers. So once again, they barely talk about writing about different topics, but the main point is that they both influence readers, which is a similarity, so B is not going to be our answer. C. The 1807 Slave Trade Act resulted in part from a book by Equiano, while the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act resulted in part from a book by Sinclair. So this one, it talks about a difference. They influence different laws, but also talks about a similarity. They both influence laws. So it talks about both a similarity and a difference. It doesn't strictly emphasize a single one. So it's not going to be C. And then D, the interesting narrative of the life of okay, I'm skipping that. And The Jungle are two works of literature that contributed to new legislation. So this time, it's talking about a similarity. It's just straight up saying a similarity. So that's not going to be our answer. So our answer is going to be A because it does say a difference, which is that one book's an autobiography while another book is fictional. Question number 5. Let's find a task, which is to explain how the House of Wisdom preserved the world's knowledge. Let's look at A. The House of Wisdom was known for bringing together knowledge from around the world, including from Greece, India, and China. That's cool. It talks about how they got knowledge from around the world, but it doesn't talk about how they preserved it, so it's not going to be A. B. Founded in Iraq in the 8th century, the House of Wisdom they employed many scholars as translators. Cool, scholars as translators, but doesn't talk about how it doesn't talk about the word's knowledge, and it doesn't talk about how they preserved it, so it's not going to be B. C. Writings from the Greek philosopher Aristotle and the Indian mathematician, that guy, were preserved at the House of Wisdom. Cool, it talks about how they preserved two people's writings, alright? Doesn't talk about how they preserved the whole world. So it's not going to be C, which means our answer will be D. But let's read it and find out why. The House of Wisdom collected writings from different countries and created paper versions in Arabic to be studied and shared. So yeah, it talks about how they got writings from different countries, so that's where they got the world's knowledge. And then they created paper versions in Arabic, and that's how they preserved it. They translated it to Arabic, and then they made it paper versions to be shared. Question number 6, let's find a task, which is to provide an explanation and an example of Olivero's sonic meditation. So there's two things we need to do here. We need to have an explanation and an example. So let's look at it. Sonic meditations is not music, but rather a series of sound-based meditations that consist of instructions. Meditation that's 18, for instance, instructs participants to listen to a sound until you no longer recognize it. So it does provide an explanation on what sonic meditations is. It's a series of sound-based meditations, and it also gives an example because it gives meditation 18. So A will be our answer, but once again, let's go through the rest. In 1971, Oliveros created Sonic Meditations, a series of meditations that consist of instructions for participants to make, imagine, listen to, or remember sounds. That does explain what the sonic meditations are, but it doesn't give an example of it, so it's not going to be B. C. Walk so silently that the bottoms of your feet become ears. How does that even work? Is one example of the instructions found in Olivero's sonic meditations. Great. I mean, it literally says it's an example, but it doesn't explain what these sonic meditations are, so it's not going to be C. And D. While both meditations consist of instructions, Meditation 18 instructs participants to listen, whereas Meditation 5 instructs participants to walk. So this is talking about a difference between different meditations, but it doesn't give an explanation of what the sonic meditations are, so it's not going to be D. And the answer is A because it does give the explanation on what sign of meditations is and also give an example of one of them. Question number 7. Let's look at the task, which is to emphasize the aim of the research study. So this is just like question number 1 where we had to find the aim. So let's look at our answer choices. Researchers wanted to know. Alright, well, that's our answer. Once again, what was their aim? Why did they want to do this study? Because they wanted to know something. Alright, I don't care what they want to know. Influence lizard egg clutch size don't matter. Alright, they wanted to know something, and that's why they did the research study. But let's keep moving on. After they obtained data for over 3,900 lizard species, researchers determined that larger clutch size was associated with environments in higher latitudes that have more seasonal change. That's great, that's what they found with their study, but it doesn't talk about why they did the study. See, we now know that lizards in higher latitude environments may lay larger clutches to take advantage of shorter windows of favorable conditions. Cool, that's another thing they found with that study, but not why they did the study in the first place. And D, researchers obtained clutch size and habitat data for over 3,900 lizard species and analyzed the data with statistical models. Alright, that talks about how they did the research, but doesn't talk about why they did it, so B, C, D are wrong, and A is the answer because the researchers wanted to know something, and that's why they did that study. Question number 8, let's find a task, which is to compare the two women's contributions to the March on Washington. Let's look at our answer choices. Hedgeman and Bates contributed to the march in different ways. Bates, for example, delivered a brief but memorable address. Cool, it talks about what Bates did for the march, but it doesn't talk about what Hedgeman did, so this answer is wrong. B. Hedgeman worked in politics and helped organize the march, while Bates was a journalist and school desegregation advocate. Great, it talks about that Hedgeman organized the march, but it didn't say what Bates did for the march, so it's not going to be B. C. Although Hedgeman worked behind the scenes to make sure a woman speaker was included, Bates was the sole woman to speak at the march. So, it talks about what Hedgeman did, she worked behind the scenes, then it talks about what Bates did, she was the sole woman to speak. So it talks about what both of the women did for the march, and C is going to be our answer. Let's look at D though. Many African American women, including Bates and Hedgeman, fought for civil rights, but only one spoke at the march. Okay? First things first, it doesn't talk about which woman spoke at the march. And second thing second? Is that what you're supposed to say? Anyways, the next thing is that it doesn't even say what the other woman did. So, it's not going to be D. Our answer will be C because it talks about what both of the women did for the march. Question number 9. Let's find a task which is to present the study and its methodology. Now, if you don't know what a methodology is, it basically means what did they do to reach their goal? How did they approach the problem? What did they do to solve that problem? So let's look at A. A study revealed that ducklings, which expend up to 62.8% less energy when swimming in a line behind their mother, also experience 158% less drag. Cool. It talks about what the study found, but it doesn't talk about what the study is in the first place, and it doesn't talk about how they reached that conclusion. How did they find out that ducklings experience 158% less drag? So A is not going to be our answer. B. Seeking to understand how ducklings swimming in a line behind their mother save energy, Jiming, I'm hoping that's how you say it, Jiming Yuan used computer simulations to study the effect of the mother duck's wake. Cool. This one does talk about the study, which is to understand how ducklings swimming in the line behind their mother save energy, and it also talks about how he found that out, which was by using computer simulations. So B is going to be our answer. Let's keep going on though. C. Ji-Ming Yuan studied the physics behind the fact that by being pushed forward in a forward direction by waves, ducklings save energy. Cool. It doesn't talk about what the study even is. He's studying something, but what is the study about? And it doesn't talk about how he found this out. So C is not gonna be our answer. And D, naval architect Jiming Yuan discovered that ducklings are pushed in a forward direction by the waves of their mother's wake, reducing the effect of drag by 158%. Once again, he found something out. This is like the exact same thing with A, alright? What is the study about and how did he find this out? So it's not going to be B or B, D. Our answer is B because it talks about the study, which is understand all of this, and its methodology, which was using computer simulations. Question number 10. Let's find what the task is, which is to present Tan's research to an audience unfamiliar with the Angkor Wat. Now, if y'all didn't know, the Angkor Wat is a Cambodian temple and it's actually the largest religious building in the world. This isn't relevant at all. I just really wanted to say that. Anyways, A. Tan photographed Angkor Wat's plaster walls and then applied decorrelation stretch analysis to the photographs. Cool. I mean, it's talking about what his research was about. But it doesn't explain what the Angkor Wat is. I mean, it's talking about the Angkor Wat, but what is the Angkor Wat? So A is not the answer. B. Decorrelation stretch analysis is a novel digital imaging technique that Tan used to enhance the contrast between colors in a photograph. Cool. So instead of explaining what the Angkor Wat is, it's explaining what his technique was. Yeah, no, it's not. It's not B. C. Using a novel digital imaging technique, Tan revealed hundreds of images hidden on the walls of Angkor Wat, a Cambodian temple. So yes, this does present Tan's research, which is when he reviewed hundreds of hidden images using his digital imaging technique, and it also explains what the Angkor Wat is, which is a Cambodian temple. So C is our answer. And then D, built to honor a Hindu god before becoming a Buddhist temple, Cambodia's Angkor Wat concealed hundreds of images on its plaster walls. So this does explain what the Angkor Wat is. However, it doesn't talk about Tan's research at all. So our answer is going to be C because it talks about his research, which is when he reviewed all these images, and it says what the Angkor Wat is, which is a Cambodian temple. Question number 11. Let's find out what the task is, which is to explain what a quenched galaxy is. Let's look at our answer choices. Before quenching, a starburst galaxy will form stars at a rapid rate. Cool, it talks about what happens before quenching, but it doesn't talk about what a quenched galaxy is, so it's not A. B. When it becomes quenched, a starburst galaxy enters the post-starburst phase. Cool, it talks about what happens after it becomes quenched, but it doesn't say what a quenched galaxy is, so it's not B. C. Having entered the post-starburst phase, a quenched galaxy is one that no longer forms stars. Well, there you go. It just said what a quenched galaxy is. One that no longer forms stars. So C is our answer. And then D, a starburst galaxy will lose star-forming gas and eventually become quenched. So this talks about how a galaxy becomes quenched, but it doesn't say what a quenched galaxy is. So C is going to be our answer because it says what a quenched galaxy is, one that no longer forms stars. Question number 12. Let's find the task, which is to emphasize the aim of the research study. Another one of these aims of the research studies. So let's move on to our answer choices. Thomas Rogers and F. Leland Russell, researchers at Wichita State University, wanted to know. Boom, we're done. They wanted to know something, so that's why they did the research study. So A is our answer. Let's keep going though. Thanks to the work done by Thomas and Leland, we now know that droughts may have played a role in the woodland expansion. Cool. That's one of the things they found with their research, but why did they do that research? C. Wichita State University researchers had determined that tree population growth was associated with dry intervals. Cool. It's what these researchers found, but why did these researchers do that research? D. Thomas and Leland analyzed core samples from oak trees on a site that was not wooded in the past, indexing the age of the trees with historical climate data. Alright, this talks about how they found their research and how they did their research, but not why they did their research. So A is our answer. The aim of the research study was to find something because they wanted to know something. Question number 13. Let's look at our task, which is to make and support a generalization about the Alta conflict. So we have to do two things here. First, we have to make a generalization, and then we have to support it. Alright, let's look at our answer choices. During the Alta conflict, Sami activists staged protests to block the construction of a dam on the Alta River in Norway that would disrupt local fishing and reindeer herding. Yeah, but that is not a generalization. They straight up told you what they did, alright? They made these protests because it would do this and that, alright? That is no generalization. That is way too specific. So it's not it. B. Although the dam that the Sami activists had protested was ultimately built, the Alta conflict had a lasting impact. So this does make a generalization. It said that it had a lasting impact. However, it doesn't really support it at all. It doesn't say how it had a lasting impact. If anything, it had like the exact opposite of an impact. I mean, the whole reason they were protesting was to block the construction of the dam, and the dam was still built. So like, what was the point of the protest? All right. C. Sami rights to lands, water, and resources received international attention and legal protections as a result of the Alta conflict. So, it told you what they got from the Alta conflict, but it doesn't really make any sort of generalization. I mean, just straight up told you what they got. So it's not going to be C. And then D, the Alta conflict had a lasting impact, resulting in international attention and legal protections for sovereign rights to lands, waters, and resources. So this time it does make a generalization, which is that it had a lasting impact. And then it also supported it by saying they got all of these stuff right here. So our answer is D. And even though this second part of the sentence right here is basically the exact same as this one, which is answer choice C, the difference is that D actually did make that generalization. Question number 14. Let's look at what the task is, which is to make and support a generalization about Nosologists' definition of an island. So, once again, we have two things that we need to do. First, we have to make a generalization about Nosologists' definition of an island, and then we have to support that. So, let's look at our answer choices. The definition of an island as any piece of land surrounded by water is supported by some nosologists, scientists who study islands. So, this does say that the definition of an island is something and that it's supported by some nosologists, but it doesn't straight up say that this is what the nosologist's definition of an island is. It's just saying that it's supported by some of them. So A is not going to be our answer. B. Multiple accounts of Sweden's islands have been based on different definitions of an island. It talks about different definitions, but it doesn't straight up say what the nosologist's definition is, so it's not going to be B. C. Based on a recent count, Sweden has a relatively small number of islands with at least 50 permanent residents. Once again, just like with B, it doesn't say what the nosologist's definition is, so it's not going to be C. And lastly, we already know it's going to be D. Oh shoot, but let's see. Nosologists' different definitions can result in huge disparities in counts of islands, as the example of Sweden showed. So, this one does make a generalization about the nosologist's definition of an island, which is that their different definitions can result in huge disparities, and then it also supports it by giving the example of Sweden. So, D will be our answer. Question number 15. Let's find what the task is, which is to summarize the study's findings. Now, you can do this problem without looking at the bullet points, but since you do have to summarize something, you can go to the bullet points for this question. Alright, let's look at our answer choices. To arrive at these findings, which describe dual methods of processing smells in the piriform cortex, and Chen devised a study using mathematical models. So this doesn't say what the findings were. It's just said how they got to the findings. I mean, it literally said how they got to the findings, but it doesn't say what the findings are. So it's not going to be A. B. That person and Chen showed that olfactory information is captured by cells in the piriform cortex where the perception of odor forms. So they showed this, but it doesn't say what they found. So it's not going to be B. C. Using mathematical models, that person and Shen devised a study to better understand the workings of the brain's olfactory system. So this talked about why they made that study, which was to better understand the workings, but it doesn't talk about what they found from it. So it's not going to be C. And then D, according to that person and Chen, the brain can toggle between capturing olfactory information at a given moment and tracking changes in that information over time. So this does talk about, well, I mean, it's really the only answer left. And this technically does summarize the findings. But once again, this one you might need to read the bullet points so you actually know what their findings even were. Question number 16. Let's see what the task is, which is to make and support a generalization about the orbits of comets. So we have to do two things here. First, we have to make a generalization about the orbits of comets, and then we have to support it. So let's look at it. Astronomers estimate that the number of comets orbiting the sun is in the billions. The comet's orbits may change over time. So it does make a generalization about the orbits of comets, which is that they may change over time. But it never supports it. It never gives an example of how. So it's not going to be A. B. Like Uranus, Jupiter, and Mars, billions of comets orbit the sun. Cool, comets orbit the sun. But it doesn't make a generalization about their orbit, and it doesn't support that at all. So it's not going to be B. C. One example of a comet is 81P/Wild, whose orbit around the Sun once lay between Uranus's and Jupiter's orbits, but is now positioned between those of Jupiter and Mars. So, it does give an example of a comet's orbit whose did change, but it never made this generalization right here, and it never stated that their orbits might change. So, yes, it gave the evidence, but it never made the claim in the first place. So it's not going to be C. And then D, a comet's orbit around the Sun may change over time. The orbit of comet 81P/Wild once lay between the orbits of Uranus and Jupiter, but is now positioned between those of Jupiter and Mars. So this time, it does make the claim, it does make that generalization, that a comet's orbit may change over time, and then it does give that evidence by giving the example of the orbit of comet 81P/Wild. So D is going to be our answer. Question number 17. Let's see what the task is, and it's to summarize the Kelp Highway hypothesis. Now, the last time we had this summarized question, we could do it because all we had to do was summarize the findings. So we didn't need to look at the bullet points because you've noticed some patterns now. It's super easy to find the findings, the methodology, or the aim, but this time we have to summarize some random hypothesis. So you might need to read the bullet points for this one. However, if you got some really good intuition and some really good context clue reading, you could probably make it through this one without looking at the bullet points. But we already saved so much time by skipping the bullet points on all the other ones, so we can slow down and read the bullet points for this one just to guarantee it. So let's start reading. Alright, they important thing here, they first arrived in the Americas by sea, and that they traveled between Pacific Ocean islands and coastlines from Northeast Asia to the Americas, and then they thought these islands and coastal zones were later submerged, and that a coastal route, including provided a rich mix of resources. And then this entire scenario is known as the Kelp Highway hypothesis. So let's summarize it real quick. Humans first arrived in the Americas by going through the Pacific Ocean islands and coastlines, and these islands were later submerged. And along this route, there was a rich mix of resources. So let's look at our answer choices and see what best matches that description. So this one, Ocean islands and coastlines likely contain a rich mix of marine, estuarine, riverine, and terrestrial resources such as seaweeds, fish, and birds, according to researchers. So this just talks about this one point right here. It doesn't talk about the whole thing, so it's not A. B. One argument about how humans first arrived in the Americas is the Kelp Highway hypothesis proposed by John Erlandson and colleagues. Cool. It talks about the Kelp Highway hypothesis. Well, I mean, it says that it's one argument, but it doesn't specifically describe what this hypothesis even is about. So it's not going to be B. C. Humans may first have arrived in Americas by sea, traveling between the Pacific Ocean islands and coastlines, and subsisting on a variety of resources. So yep, that basically hits everything. Besides that, these islands were later submerged, but that's the best one we have so far. So this one's probably going to be a maybe. And then D, as glaciers melted and sea levels rose, many Pacific Ocean islands and coastal zones were submerged. So once again, this one only talks about this one specific point. It doesn't talk about the others, so it's not going to be D. And C is going to be our answer. Now, if you wanted to do this question without looking at the bullet points, you just have to find which one is the most detailed one, because your summaries should always be detailed. Let's look at A. It says that these islands and coastlines likely contain a rich mix of resources. So it just talks about one thing, how they had resources. Now let's look at B. One argument is that they arrived in the Americas by the Kelp Highway hypothesis. So it doesn't even describe or explain the Kelp Highway hypothesis at all, so it's for sure not going to be B. C. Humans may first have arrived in Americas by sea, so that's one thing. And then it talks about how they traveled between these islands and coastlines, that's another one. And then they subsisted on a variety of resources, so that's a third one. And then D, it talks about how these sea levels rose, and then these coastal zones were submerged. So that's once again only one thing. And our most detailed one here is going to be C because it includes three details, and that does match up with what we got by reading the bullet points. So at the end of the day, don't worry too much about time on this one. Just go with what you think will get you the answer. Right? If it takes you a little bit more time, if it takes you a little bit less time. Question number 18. Let's see what the task is, which is to provide an overview of the Matsutake commodity chain. So, a commodity chain is basically a supply chain. Now, let's look at our answer choices. The contemporary Matsutake commodity chain has its origins in the 1980s when, according to Singh, the scarcity of matsutake in Japan first became clear. Now, this talks about how it originated, but it doesn't give a direct overview of it. It doesn't talk about where it starts and where it ends. So it's not going to be A. B. Commodity chains include the linked production and purchase of commodities such as the matsutake mushroom on the world market. Cool. It talks about what a commodity chain is, but it doesn't specifically highlight the matsutake chain. It just gives it as an example. So it's not going to be B. C. Decades after the Japanese import of matsutake began, a commodity chain now links matsutake pickers in Oregon with the wealthy consumers of the costly mushrooms in Japan. So this does give that overview. It talks about how it starts in Oregon with the pickers, and then it ends in Japan with the wealthy consumers. So C is going to be our answer. Now let's look at D. Wealthy consumers who buy the costly mushrooms in Japan are at one end of the matsutake commodity chain. So this one straight up just says it only talks about one end, but it doesn't talk about the other end, which we know is the pickers in Oregon. So our answer is going to be C because it gives the overview of the entire chain. Question number 19. Let's see what the task is. And it's 2. Present the study's findings to an audience already familiar with thermal inversion. So there's 2 things that we need to hit on. The first thing is that we need to present the study's findings, and the second thing we need to make sure is that the audience is already familiar with thermal inversions. So basically, we don't need to explain what thermal inversions are. Let's look at our answer choices. A. Heat absorbing metals may reside in a planet's upper atmosphere. So this one doesn't explain what thermal inversions are, so that's 1 point. But it doesn't present what the study's findings are. It's just saying that these metals may reside there. It doesn't say what the study found. So it's not going to be A. B. The team studied thermal inversions in 25 gas giants, which are largely composed of helium and hydrogen. So once again, this one doesn't explain what thermal inversions are, so that's good. But it also doesn't show you what they found. I mean, it's talking about how they studied these things, but it doesn't say what they found. So it's not going to be B. C. Researchers found that gas giants featuring a thermal inversion were likely to contain heat-absorbing metals which may reside in the planet's upper atmospheres. So it does talk about what they found because it straight up said found right here. And it also doesn't explain what thermal inversions are, so C is going to be our answer. Let's look at D. Gas giants were likely to contain heat-absorbing metals when they featured a layer of atmosphere warmer than the layer beneath it, researchers found. This phenomenon is known as a thermal inversion. So it does show you what they found, which is that gas giants were likely to contain heat-absorbing metals. However, it does explain what a thermal inversion is, because it said it's known as a thermal inversion. However, the audience should already be familiar with this, so we didn't need to explain it. So our answer will be C, because it does show you what they found, and it didn't explain thermal inversions. Question number 20. Let's see what the task is, and it's 2. Emphasize the duration and purpose of Cohen's and Rodriguez's work. So, once again, we have to do 2 things. First thing is we have to emphasize the duration of their work, and the second thing is we have to emphasize the purpose of their work. So, let's look at our answer choices. At the Gullah Museums in Hilton Head Island in Georgetown, South Carolina, visitors can learn more about the Gullah people who have lived in the region for centuries. So it's talking about how they can learn some random things, but it doesn't talk about the duration or the purpose of these people's work. If anything, it doesn't even mention their names, so it's not going to be A. B. Louis Miller Cohen and Vermel Rodriguez have worked to preserve the culture of the Gullah people who have lived in the United States since the 18th century. So this one does talk about the purpose, which is they have worked to preserve the culture. However, it doesn't talk about how long they worked to do this. It doesn't talk about their duration, so it's not going to be B. C. Since 2003, Louis Miller Cohen and Vermel Rodriguez have worked to preserve Gullah culture through their museums. So this one does give you the duration, which is since 2003. And then it also gives you the purpose, which is to preserve Gullah culture. So C is going to be our answer. And then D, influenced by the traditions of West and Central Africa, Gullah culture developed in parts of the southeastern United States in the 18th century. So this one talks about how this culture developed, but once again, just like A, it doesn't even mention these people's names, let alone their duration and purpose. So C will be our answer because it gives you the duration since 2003, and the purpose, which was to preserve culture. Question number 21. Let's see what the task is, and it's to make a generalization about the kind of study conducted by these three people. So, let's look at our answer choices. Based on statistical analysis, these three people claim that John Lennon wrote the verse of In My Life. Cool. So, it's talking about one thing they found, which is that this, I was about to say this guy, but it's the John Lennon, so I can't say that. So, John Lennon wrote this verse, but it doesn't talk about the kind of study they did, so it's not going to be A. B. There's only an 18.9% probability that Paul McCartney wrote the verse for In My Life. John Lennon is the more likely author. So once again, just like A, it's talking about one of their findings, but it doesn't talk about the kind of study they did. C. It is likely that John Lennon, not Paul McCartney, wrote the verse for In My Life. Okay, bro, this is like the third time they said the exact same thing, which is that John Lennon wrote this verse. Alright, I get it, okay? Once again, it's talking about the findings and not the type of study they did. So our answer is D, and let's see. Researchers have used statistical methods to address questions of authorship within the field of music. Look at that. The kind of study is statistical methods. Man, three times in a row they talked about how John Lennon wrote the verse, alright? Like, I get it, man. Anyways, our answer is D because it does talk specifically about the kind of study, which is statistical methods. Question number 22. Let's see what the task is, and it's to begin a narrative about Wong's award nominated web series. Now, a narrative is a story, and if you know, a story should be interesting, it should have plot, and it should be in sequential order, and it should be detailed, all that type of stuff. So, let's move on to our answer choices. Looking at A, in 2012, director and visual effects artist Freddie Wong launched a new action comedy web series, Video Game High School. Now, this great way to start a story. We set the time, which is in 2012. We introduced the creator of the web series, which is Freddie Wong. He's a director and visual effects artist. Then it also talks about the web series. It gives you its name, Video Game High School, as well as its genre, which is action comedy. So super detailed, and A is going to be your answer. Now let's look at B. Video Game High School was celebrated for its inventive video game centric world and high quality special effects, and it was nominated for a Producers Guild Award for Outstanding Digital Series. Now, this one, it does give you a little bit of information on the web series. It says that it was celebrated for its video game centric world and high quality special effects, and that it also won an award. However, it does not set the time at all, and it also doesn't even mention the creator's name once. Not to mention, it also kind of skips straight to the fact that it won an award. It didn't have all that, suspenseful build up, started from the bottom, now we're here. None of that. It just straight up said that it won an award. So probably not the best way to start a story. C. Wong, co-creator of the YouTube channel Rocket Jump, would go on to see his web series be nominated for a Producers Guild Award. Alright, this one does give the name of the creator, Wong, but it doesn't set the time at all. It never says it was made in 2012. Not to mention, it doesn't even give the name of his web series. It just says it's just some web series, alright? You don't even know what the name is. And then it also says it was nominated for an award, so we're skipping to the end again. And then D, in 2012, Video Game High School premiered on Rocket Jump. It would later be nominated for an award. This one does set the time in 2012, and it also gives the name of the web series, which is Video Game High School. The only problem is it never said it was a web series. What is Video Game High School? Is it a high school? Is it a video game? Is it a web series? Is it a movie? We'll never know because it never says. Not to mention it said it premiered on Rocket Jump, but what is Rocket Jump? So D is not going to be our answer either. So your best choice will be A. Now this is definitely the hardest question out of all 25 questions because you actually have to think. I mean, these previous questions, like this one, kind of study, what kind of study did they use? Statistical methods. Boom, just like that. This one, all of a sudden you have to turn into prime J.K. Rowling, start writing the next Harry Potter, and write the craziest story with all the suspenseful build up and details and all of that. So yeah, I got this one wrong at first. I'm not gonna lie, my teacher also got this one wrong, but hopefully after this explanation it cleared things up. Question number 23. Let's see what the task is, and it's to emphasize a similarity between the two ways a magnificent frigate bird acquires food. Now, whenever you're finding a similarity, you're either going to see the words both or neither. So let's move on to your answer choices. A. A magnificent frigate bird never dives into the water, instead using its hook-tipped bill to snatch prey from the surface. So this one only talks about one way it acquires food, and it doesn't even talk about similarity between the non-existent second way. So it's not going to be A. B, neither. There you go, that's your answer. It uses neither. But, we'll keep going. Neither of a magnificent frigate bird's two ways of acquiring food requires a bird to dive into water. So it's talking about the similarity that the two ways you don't need or it doesn't need to dive into water. C. Of the magnificent frigate bird's two ways of acquiring food, only one is known as kleptoparasitism. Only one. So it's talking about a difference, not a similarity, so it's not going to be C. And then D, in addition to snatching. Okay, bro, in addition, if we're talking about in addition, we're talking about a different thing, and that's a difference. Anyways, we'll keep reading. In addition to snatching prey from the water with its hook-tipped bill, a magnificent frigate bird takes food from other birds by force. So it's talking about two different ways it acquires food. That's a difference, so it's not going to be D. It's going to be B because it talks about how both ways don't require it to dive into water. Question number 24. Let's see what the task is, and it's to emphasize the relative sizes of the two capitals' populations. Now, the keyword here is relative sizes. Now, what does relative mean? Relative means that you need to compare one thing to another. So in this case, you need to compare the size of one capital to something else. Now, this can be one capital versus the other capital, or this could be one capital versus its own country. Now, let's look at our answer choices. So A, Mongolia's capital is, yep, that city, which has 907,802 people, and Vietnam's capital is Hanoi, which has 7,781,631 people. Now, this one is just saying the population sizes of these cities, of these capitals, but it's not comparing it to anything, so it's not going to be A. B, comparing, okay, so it's comparing Vietnam and Mongolia. 7,781,631 is 8.1%, 8.14% of Vietnam's population, and 907,802 is 31.98% of Mongolia's. So it is comparing something. It's comparing the population size towards its own country. What's comparing the population size of a capital versus its own country's population. The only problem is it never even mentions the name of the capitals, so it's not gonna be B. C. Even though Hanoi, population 7,781,631, is larger than that capital, population 907,802, that capital accounts for more of its country's population. So, it talks about the capital's population, which is Hanoi with this population, and then it talks about how it's larger than the other capital with that population. So this is a comparison. And then you also have this comparison right here where it talks about how this capital has more of its country's population. So it's saying that it has a big chunk of its country's population. So C is going to be our answer because it does compare the population size of the capital to something else. And then D, the populations of the capitals of Mongolia and Vietnam are 907,802, that capital, and 7,781,631, Hanoi, respectively. Just like A, it just mentions the population size of the capital, but it doesn't compare it towards anything else, so it's not going to be D. Our answer is C because it compares the population size of a capital towards something else. Question number 25. We're finally at the last one, and let's see what the task is. So, they want to use a quotation to emphasize a potential problem with the World Wide Web theory. So, there's two parts to this task. The first one is that you need to use a quotation, and the second part is that it needs to emphasize a potential problem. So, let's look at our answer choices. Describing trees as super cooperators, Samard first suggested that trees can exchange resources with one another in 1997. So this one does use a quotation. It says right here, describing trees as super cooperators, and you see these quotation marks right here. However, it doesn't talk about a problem. It just talks about how they can exchange resources. And if anything, that's a good thing, not a problem. So it's not going to be A. B. In The Decay of the World Wide Web, Karst and colleagues note that common mycorrhizal networks have captured the interest of broad audiences. So this one also uses quotations right here, and then this is the phrase. However, it doesn't talk about a problem once again. It talks about how it captured the interests of audiences. And if anything, that's good, right? So it's not going to be B. Let's look at C. After evaluating dozens of CMN studies, Karst and colleagues expressed concern that recent claims about common mycorrhizal networks are disconnected from evidence. So of course, we do have a problem right here because they're expressing concern about these bad thingies and how they're disconnected from evidence. And of course, it also uses a quotation because we see these quotation marks right here. So C is our answer. Now let's look at D. Despite the concerns expressed in the 2022 study, the decay of the Wood Wide Web, the Wood Wide Web theory remains popular. Now, this one doesn't use a quotation and it doesn't emphasize a problem. Now, you might see these quotation marks right here and you might think that's a quotation, but that's just saying the name of the study. It's not actually pulling a phrase out from the study. And it also doesn't talk about a problem. I mean, it says that there's concerns expressed, but about what? You don't know. So answer is C because it says the problem is that these claims are disconnected from evidence, and it also uses a quotation, which is the same disconnected from evidence. Okay, that's finally all of rhetorical synthesis, all 25 problems, and hopefully now you understand that these bullet point questions will be the easiest questions. You know, you can treat yourself to a nice break because these are the very last questions at 24 to 27. Alright, I'll see you. Bye.